So let's talk about history though. You can't change history, right? But when historical events occur, like say the Queen of England passing, what it does is it opens up, it creates a space, a slippage for history to enter into the conversation once again. But when you bring historical events into the present day, because that present day has now changed, whose history is being centered, who's telling that history, and how that history is understood will change. Let me explain. Hi, my name is Dr. Nicole Truesdale. I'm an anthropologist and also an abolitionist scholar and teacher. What we're seeing now in real time, in actual real time, is how history has not nor has never been linear. It's always in a loop. It's always in this kind of cycle that, depending upon what point in history you are pointing to in the present day, will then determine how that present day is understood and maintained. And right now, what we're seeing with the great divide around social media and through the public discourse and news outlets is the different ways that people are understanding the present day historical event that just happened, Queen Elizabeth dying, and how they are interpreting that present day historical event based upon how history has impacted them in their locations through time. And so what we are seeing is a revelation that many of the historical constructs around British monarchy, the Queen, imperialism, colonization, those who are telling those stories is now opened up because now we have different modalities and different mechanisms to do so, one of them being things like this app. But when you bring different voices to the table, those voices are going to shake that motherfucking table until it can be flipped over, because the table was never set up to be able to allow multifaceted understandings of these historical events to have a conversation together. So when you suppress people's historical understandings of what happened to them in their past, and they now have an opportunity in the present to bring that past into the present day, what you are getting is what you are seeing right now on this app, this discourse. So it's not about eating up too much. It's about an understanding that history does not change, but we have not been given the full history until the present day. And this is why I teach outside of institutional spaces. So if you want to learn more with and from me, don't be afraid to check out my Patreon, links in the bio, Knowledge Without Borders. In my BIPOC book club, we are now reading Mojo Working, that talks about African American hoodoo. And if any of my teachings hit, don't be afraid to hit that Cash App or Patreon donation button. Until next time. Okay, we need to actually learn from history instead of repeating it. But in order to learn from our historical past, we must look at that past from a different lens, from a different sight, okay? Right behind me are pictures from what the U.S. loves to purport from all sides is the bastion of American democracy via civil rights, is the civil rights era, right? And we get these images in black and white. When we actually understand what we are looking at through the lens, not of the state, but through the lens of our experiences on the ground as people who are still living in the aftermaths of a plantation economy that needs our subjugation, the story is different. Because right now we're repeating history, y'all, by putting our kids on the front line, by putting youth on the front line, and somehow thinking that is going to get the state to move, when the state has already shown us time and time again through history, it will let our kids die as long as the ideology is upheld. So when you look at these pictures right now, I want you to use that sight as you examine what the 1960s did to youth. From the Freedom Riders to the Freedom Schools to SNCC, to those who were a part of SNCC and helped organize on the ground like Ella Baker and Fannie Lou Hamer, they were met with nothing but violence as they sat in and enacted a nonviolent aesthetic, a nonviolent methodology. Because the idea then, the strategy was, if we can meet our oppressor with a different type of engagement, love and not hate, maybe they will see us. And guess what? They sick the fucking dogs on these kids. They sick the fucking hoses on students. And that is what the state showed was the response when you put kids on the front line. So I want us to take the sacred cows and put them into the mundane and stop looking at the 1960s and its aftermath and this kind of neoliberal imaginings or this neoconservative imaginings, because they're both sides of the same goddamn coin. They were removing the actual harm that was done and not allowing us to learn from history instead of making it static. Did the strategies work, y'all? Can we allow humanity to come in and stop deifying those who did what they thought they were supposed to do in order to make space in a society that told black folks, brown folks, indigenous folks, queer folks, disabled folks that we were not fully human? We said we are, we demand to be seen, but did the strategies actually work? That is the question we have to ask ourselves now, because Tennessee, Florida, and the likes to come, we cannot put our kids on the front line and demand that they do the work that we already know the state will railroad them over and keep us in the same space. So let us learn from history instead of making history static so that the present day can actually give us the strategies we need to find a way forward. It can be really hard to imagine what freedom looks like and feels like and what peace is when we have not truly grappled with the violence that we have grown up and are currently living in. And this is why history is so important, but history through a socio-political and critical lens that allows us to see all of the shit we keep reproducing from the past that gets transmuted into the present. This is why I talk about the plantation system so much and how that never left, but it got transmuted because the foundations of this nation are built upon subjugation and pure violence. So how can we imagine freedom and peace when we won't grapple with the reality of the violence that we all live within? This is why I started my book club and my Patreon. And the first book we're going to talk through is Ebony and Ivy. So for more information, links in the bio, like, follow, and share for more.